There are parts of you you've buried so deep, you forgot they were ever yours. Desires that didn't feel clean. Fantasies that made you question your worth. Moments where your body reacted before your mind could catch up, and you felt shame for what was instinct. So instead of confronting them, you shut the door, tightly. But what you repress doesn't die. It distorts and waits. There is a part of your soul that speaks in sensation. A part of your truth that pulses through skin, breath, hunger, and touch. And when you were told that part was too much, too dark, or too dangerous, you exiled it. But that exile didn't bring peace. It brought shame, obsession, and disconnection. You were never given a map, only walls. Walls built by purity culture, by trauma, by silence, by the unbearable tension between longing and punishment. You were handed a narrative. Your body is the enemy. Your desire is a test. Your arousal is evidence of sin. And so you learned to suppress, not express. To perform control, even when your insides were begging to be known. But what if your sexual shadow isn't something to conquer? What if it's something to integrate? Something to reclaim? This video isn't about indulgence. It's not about denial either. It's about the uncomfortable third space where your longing meets your wounds and asks to be witnessed. Because the part of you you've labeled as broken, perverted, or sinful might actually be the doorway back to your integrity. You were taught that sexuality was something you had to control, or it would control you. But what if that control is what's made you feel so fragmented? What if the very energy you're suppressing is the one trying to heal you? This isn't just about lust. This is about power. About all the moments you were made to feel like your body was dangerous or disposable. It's about how your nervous system learned to brace against its own aliveness, and how that disconnection became your normal. When we talk about the sexual shadow, we're not talking about wrong thoughts. We're talking about the emotional scar tissue beneath them. The parts of your story you were never allowed to finish feeling. The pain that wrapped itself around your pleasure until you couldn't tell the difference. Somewhere along the way, you decided, if I want to be accepted, I have to hide what arouses me. If I want to be loved, I have to deny what excites me. And slowly, you carved yourself into a shape that could be safe, but never whole. Maybe you were told desire is dangerous, that your body must be tamed. Maybe you learned to associate intimacy with manipulation, pleasure with shame. Maybe your first encounters with sexuality were not voluntary, but coerced, confusing, or even traumatic. And in that confusion, your body became a stranger to you. A source of tension, of contradiction, of guilt. So you put it away. You spiritualized your discomfort. You convinced yourself that detachment was maturity. You made peace with repression, because at least it felt predictable. But repression is not healing, and avoidance is not the same as purity. Your sexual shadow isn't a villain. It's a messenger, a reflection of unmet needs, of early confusion, of sacred energy that was never named with love. It is the echo of moments where touch felt unsafe, or shame felt louder than curiosity. And it is waiting for you, not to destroy you, but to finally be seen. Because anything you're unwilling to explore will own you, not through violence, but through silence, not through chaos, but through craving. And when desire can't speak, it screams through sabotage. Desire isn't immoral, it's immortal. It survives every cage you put it in. And when you silence it for too long, it doesn't disappear. It becomes distorted. It returns in dreams, in compulsions, in secrecy, in guilt. Because what you reject becomes the shadow. But it was never evil. Maybe no one ever taught you that desire can be tender, not just consuming. That sexuality can be reclaimed, not erased. That arousal doesn't have to be pure or perfect to be sacred. Maybe no one ever told you, you don't need to be healed from your desires. only reunited with them. So you spent years cutting yourself in half. Sacred on Sundays, sensual in secret. You labeled your turn-ons as temptations, your hunger as humiliation. You wanted intimacy, but learned to fear the vulnerability that comes with embodiment. You wanted connection, but kept it locked behind guilt. But beneath the shame, there is honesty. And beneath the honesty, there is softness. And beneath the softness, there is you. Not the version performing goodness, the version that simply is. You will never find freedom by becoming less human. You will not heal your sexuality by starving it, only by meeting it with presence. Your body is not a battlefield, it's a language. And when you finally learn how to listen, your whole self begins to breathe again. This is not about indulgence, it's about integration. Not about acting out, but no longer acting fake. Not about obsessing over desire, but letting it finally have a name. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That includes your sexual unconscious. That includes the part of you you keep hidden, even from yourself. This is your invitation to meet it, not to fix it, but to understand it, to sit with it, to let it speak in your presence, without running, without judging, without flinching. Because if you want to feel whole, you have to welcome home the parts of you that were banished in fear, even the ones that blush, even the ones that burn. What happens when you finally open the door? When you stop pretending that part of you doesn't exist? The part that wants, aches, burns, trembles. At first, it feels like chaos. Because anything buried for too long doesn't return in whispers. It comes back like a flood. You start to notice what used to be numb. You start to feel things you had silenced for years. Not just arousal, but grief. Not just craving, but confusion. And suddenly, your body is no longer a machine you manage. It's a language you barely understand. You flinch at your own honesty. You wonder if maybe it would have been better to keep everything sealed. Because now you have to admit, you're not as in control as you thought. You're not always the calm, clear, centered version of yourself. You're human, messy, electric, sacred, and that scares you. Because when your sexuality awakens, so does your vulnerability. So does your memory. So does your hunger to be touched without being used, to be wanted without being reduced, to be seen without being judged. And that's terrifying, because most of us were never given a safe space for that kind of exposure. We were either ignored, objectified, or controlled. We were never held, especially not by ourselves. So we did what we were taught. We turned sex into performance. We turned desire into shame. We turned our bodies into currency, traded for love, validation, or approval. And maybe now, you don't even know what turns you on unless someone else is watching. Maybe you learned to crave being desired, but never learned how to desire from within. Maybe you mistake domination for power, because submission was the only path to survival. Maybe you confuse intensity with intimacy, because pain was the first place you ever felt seen. These are not failures. They are patterns. They are wounds that learned how to speak in the only language they were taught. Your sexual shadow is not the enemy. It's the ache beneath the armor. It's the innocence inside the impulse. It's the tenderness behind the taboo. And if you slow down enough, if you stop rushing to correct, purify, or condemn, you might hear what it's really trying to say. I want to feel close. I want to feel safe. I want to be chosen, even in my wildness. I want to know that what I long for won't cost me my dignity. You've spent years splitting yourself apart, sacred here, sexual there. You perform stability during the day, but ache in secret at night. You pretend your desires are under control, but they're just waiting for the next moment of exhaustion or loneliness to escape. And each time, you promise yourself, never again. But it's not about willpower. It's about integration. You can't kill your sexual shadow. You can only listen to it, until it doesn't need to scream, until it no longer hides in the corners of your mind, waiting to sabotage your peace, until it becomes part of your wholeness, not your hiddenness. That means learning what your turn-ons reveal about your history, what your kinks might be asking for, not in fantasy, but in healing. It means asking, not how do I get rid of this, but where did this start? What was I missing when this first appeared? What does this part of me need to feel safe? Because your shadow isn't random. It's patterned. It's purposeful. It's protective. Even the behaviors you judge the most, the compulsions, the fixations, the fantasies you don't want to name, they're trying to help you feel, trying to reconnect you to the body you were taught to abandon. But reconnection isn't pretty. It's slow. It's clumsy. It's full of emotion, not just desire, but sadness, rage, longing, and confusion. And if you've been using sex to numb those feelings, then real connection might feel empty at first, because it's not performing, it's not stimulating, it's just present. And presence is terrifying when you're used to disappearing. So what do? You stay. You breathe. You let yourself tremble without shutting down. You let yourself feel aroused without rushing into guilt. You ask your body, what are you trying to tell me? And you listen. With gentleness, not control. This is the slow work of re-inhabiting your body. Not just using it, but knowing it. Not just healing it, but honoring it. And in that process, you will cry. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally coming home. Because there is a little version of you still hiding, still ashamed, still thinking they're too much, still terrified that if someone ever saw the real you, they'd leave. And that version of you doesn't need more judgment. They need your arms. They need your voice. They need to hear, you're safe with me now. That's the work. That's the invitation. That's the only way to reclaim your sexuality without losing your soul. Not by numbing, not by performing, but by returning, slowly, gently, deeply, to the part of you that's always wanted to feel fully alive, without apology. There is a moment in every healing journey when you realize the shadow doesn't just live in your pain, it lives in your pleasure too. Because when you've been taught to fear your own body, even joy can feel dangerous. Even softness can feel like a threat. Even intimacy can trigger the very wounds it's meant to soothe. So you start to second-guess the good things. You question healthy desire. You wonder if maybe you're still broken, even when things are going well. And you're afraid to admit it, because everyone thinks you've moved on. But healing isn't linear, especially when it comes to the sexual self. There are layers, and every time you peel one back, something deeper gets exposed. Not because you're regressing, but because you're becoming more honest. You begin to see how many roles you've played just to survive. The seducer, because it gave you control. The caretaker, because it made you feel useful. The emotionally detached one, because closeness felt unsafe. You didn't choose these roles out of freedom. You chose them because they helped you hide. And now, as you strip them away, there's a terrifying question underneath. Who am I without performance? The answer doesn't come quickly. It's not something you figure out in one meditation session. It's something you slowly discover, moment by moment, breath by breath, mistake by mistake. And it almost always begins with silence. Not the kind of silence that avoids, but the kind that listens. Because your body has things to say, things it's been holding since childhood, things that got stuck in the spaces where you were told to be quiet, to be good, to be small. And when you stop pushing and start paying attention, it begins to speak. I never wanted that. I didn't know how to say no. I said yes, but I didn't feel safe. I thought it was love, but it felt like erasure. These are not easy confessions. They don't always come with clarity. Sometimes they arrive as tightness in your chest, sometimes as restlessness in your sleep, sometimes as tears you can't explain. And if you're not careful, you'll miss them. You'll rush back into distraction. You'll convince yourself that feeling this deeply is unnecessary, even dangerous. But the truth is, this is the work. Because your sexual shadow is not just about desire, it's about memory. It's about all the times your boundaries were blurred, your voice was silenced, your instincts were dismissed. It's about the imprint those moments left on your nervous system. So no, healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like chaos. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. But each time you let yourself stay, in the discomfort, in the stillness, in the truth, you reclaim a part of yourself that was left behind. That part might not look beautiful at first. It might be angry. It might be numb. It might be confused or conflicted or clinging to what you've outgrown. But it's yours, and it deserves to be included in your healing, not hidden from it. This is where integration begins. Not when you've cleaned everything up, but when you stop pretending anything needs to be cleaned at all. When you realize that even your darkest urges come from a place that wants connection, that wants safety, that wants to feel real. Because so many of us were taught that we had to earn love, that we had to shrink for it, sanitize for it, perform for it. But your sexuality isn't something you should have to earn your way into dud. It's a birthright, something you are, not something you achieve. And once you stop judging it, you start noticing how much of your life has been shaped by your attempts to hide it. Every relationship where you abandoned your truth to be acceptable, every moment where you said yes when you meant no, or no when you meant yes. Every impulse you buried, only to have it return stronger, louder, harder to control. It was never about being too much. It was always about having no space for your fullness, no language, no mirror, no one saying, you're allowed to feel all of this and still be good. So now, you have to become that mirror. You have to become the safe space you never had. You have to become the witness, not the judge. The one who says, I see your shadow, and I'm not leaving. That doesn't mean acting on every impulse. It doesn't mean collapsing into every craving. It means creating space. Space to feel. Space to listen. Space to ask yourself, where is this coming from? And to answer with curiosity, not shame. Because healing the sexual shadow isn't about control. It's about connection. Not about fixing what's broken, but realizing nothing was ever broken, only buried. You don't need more purity. You need more presence. You don't need more fear. You need more truth. And your truth includes the messy parts, the contradictory parts, the parts you only let surface at night when the world is quiet and your mask is off, the parts that ache to be seen without being judged, the parts that say, I want to feel alive, and I want to feel safe doing it. That's not sinful. That's human. That's sacred. And until you can hold both your holiness and your hunger in the same breath, you'll keep splitting yourself apart. You'll keep looking for redemption in rejection. You'll keep calling yourself healed while secretly feeling hollow. But there's a better way. A slower, softer, more honest way. It begins by saying, I'm willing to meet what I've feared, and then staying long enough to learn its name. There is a silence most people never enter. A silence not of peace, but of tension. The silence that lives between your desire and your shame. The silence that grows when you want to speak, but can't find the words, because you've spent your life being told those words don't belong to you. You were taught how to behave, not how to feel. You were given rules, not permission. And in that silence, your sexual shadow took shape, not as evil, but as hidden, not as dangerous, but as disowned. And anything disowned grows distorted. You began to see yourself through the eyes of others, what they wanted, what they praised, what they punished. You learned what to reveal to be loved and what to hide to be safe. But over time, the hiding becomes unbearable. Because the body remembers. It remembers every time it was ignored, every time it was used, every time it was blamed for something it only knew how to feel. It remembers, and it aches. It aches not just for touch, but for truth. Not just for stimulation, but for safety. Not just for connection, but for consent to your own self. But when you've lived your whole life under someone else's story, you begin to doubt your own. You wonder if the things you feel are right. You wonder if you're too needy, too sensitive, too complex, too wild. You're not. You are layered. You are deep. You are someone whose body speaks in metaphors and whose heart listens through sensation. And that is not something to fix. It's something to finally honor. Your sexual shadow is not just about eroticism. It's about energy. About how much of your life force has been trapped behind guilt and self-censorship. About how often you've confused repression with control and silence with healing. It's about the subtle ways your trauma hijacks your pleasure, the way your body tenses when it should soften, the way your thoughts interrupt intimacy with echoes from the past, the way your eyes scan for danger, even when you're safe. These are not signs of brokenness. They're signs of memory. Your body is not betraying you. It's trying to protect you with the only tools it's ever had. But protection, if left unchecked, becomes prison. And sooner or later, you'll have to ask, what am I protecting myself from now that I no longer need to fear? That question cracks something open. Because sometimes the fear isn't about the pain you remember. It's about the power you've never allowed yourself to feel. There is a sacred, terrifying force in your sexuality. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's alive. It refuses to be tamed. It refuses to be reduced to formulas or expectations. It wants to move. It wants to create. It wants to dissolve everything you built just to feel accepted, and replace it with something real. But that kind of power can't exist in performance. It only emerges when you let go of pretending. Pretending that you don't care. Pretending that you're past all of this. Pretending that you're always healed, always stable, always in control. Control is the last mask the shadow wears. Because if you can't be loved for your truth, you'll try to be respected for your restraint. You'll trade freedom for predictability. You'll tell yourself, at least if I manage everything, I can't be hurt again. But repression doesn't protect you from pain. It protects you from intimacy. And that's a price your soul can't afford forever. So the invitation here isn't to act out. It's to turn inward. To ask deeper questions about the things that excite you and the things that terrify you. To look at your fantasies not as perversions, but as symbols. As signposts pointing toward unmet needs, unresolved experiences, unspoken truths. You're not dirty for having desires. You're not wrong for craving what the world calls too much. You're simply someone whose body is trying to remember what it means to be fully alive. That process won't be linear. Some days you'll feel confident, other days confused. Some days you'll want to open, other days you'll want to hide. And that's okay. Healing the sexual shadow is not a straight path. It spirals. It pauses. It loops back to places you thought you'd already outgrown. Not to punish you, but to deepen your understanding. Because integration is not about perfection. It's about presence. About showing up again and again to the parts of you that are scared, messy, uncertain, and saying, you're still worthy. You're still welcome. You still belong here. That belonging starts inside you. It doesn't come from a partner, a community, or even a therapist, though those things can help. It begins the moment you decide, I will no longer abandon myself to be palatable. You may lose people when you choose this path. People who only knew how to love the version of you that was quiet, compliant, and controlled. But what you gain is yourself. The version of you that doesn't need to hide in the dark. The version that knows intimacy isn't something you perform. It's something you allow. The version that doesn't just talk about love and healing and truth, but embodies it, even in the parts that still tremble. Because when your shadow becomes your companion, when your body becomes your ally, when your desire becomes your doorway, you don't just reclaim your sexuality. You reclaim your wholeness. And in that wholeness, there is peace. Not because everything makes sense, but because nothing has to be hidden anymore. There is a kind of silence that doesn't numb you. It frees you. It's the silence that arrives after you've told the truth and no longer feel afraid of being seen. Not the polished truth, not the version you rehearse, but the raw, trembling truth that says, this is who I am, and I'm done pretending otherwise. And maybe for the first time, you feel your body take a full breath. Not out of relief, but out of recognition. Because even if no one else understands this part of you, you do now. You've spent years being divided, split between the sacred and the sensual, torn between who you wanted to be and who you were taught to hide. But something in you is tired of the splitting, tired of the shame, tired of the guilt, tired of the apology for simply existing. And that exhaustion is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment when repression finally becomes unbearable and you choose something different. Not recklessness, not chaos, but wholeness. Because your sexuality was never meant to be reduced to performance or punishment. It was never supposed to be a war zone inside you. It was meant to be a place of curiosity, a place where your soul speaks through your skin. And every time you ignore it, judge it, or suppress it, you cut off your own voice. There is a power in you that was never dirty, only misunderstood. A tenderness that was never weak, only hidden. A hunger that was never dangerous, only unspoken. And now, it's time to speak. Not to the world, not yet, but to yourself, to the younger you who was shamed, to the present you who still doubts, to the future you who longs to be free. Say it out loud if you need to. Whisper it in the dark. I am not wrong for what I feel. I am not dirty for what I desire. I am allowed to be a sensual, emotional, fully alive human being, and still be good. This isn't about chasing every impulse. This isn't about giving your body away to feel loved. This is about knowing, finally knowing, that you can stay present with what arises in you and not run. That you can feel turned on without feeling ashamed. That you can feel longing without needing to escape. That you can feel alive and not apologize for it. Maybe that's the most radical thing of all. To feel pleasure without punishment. To feel power without performance. To feel connection without collapse. And it's not a destination. It's a practice. One breath at a time. One truth at a time. One gentle yes to your own body. Again and again and again. Some days, you'll still feel the old scripts rise. The voices that tell you you're too much. The stories that call your desire dangerous. Let them come, but don't let them stay. You are not those voices. You are not your past. You are not the shame that was placed on you. You are the one who survived all of it and is still here, soft enough to feel, strong enough to stay. So, let this be your return to your body, to your truth, to your unapologetic wholeness. Let it be messy. Let it be sacred. Let it be yours. Because the truth about your sexual shadow is that it was never trying to destroy you. It was always trying to reunite you with yourself If this video spoke to something buried inside you, something you've been afraid to name, know that you are not alone. So many of us were taught to fear our own bodies, to shrink our voices, to call our deepest truths too much. But you are not too much. You are more than enough. And you deserve a life where you don't have to hide. Share in the comments. What's one belief about your sexuality you're ready to release? Subscribe if you're on a journey of healing, integration, and self-remembering. And if this touched you, pass it on. Someone else needs this truth too. Thank you, truly, for watching. And more than that, thank you for daring to go this deep.